So, how does a company that's famous for comic books, a company that's literally on the brink of collapse, end up building the most dominant, highest grossing, and culturally defining entertainment empire of the 21st century? Well, that's the wild, chaotic, and frankly unbelievable story we're going to break down right now. You've probably heard this debate, right? It's been raging for the last decade of movies. Back in 2019, the legendary director Martin Scorsese famously said Marvel movies are not cinema, comparing them to theme parks. And look, that's a shot across the bow. It basically framed the whole Marvel project as, something less than real art. But here's the thing about those theme parks. They make an absolutely insane amount of money. We're talking over $29 billion at the global box office. I mean, that's not just a success story. That's a force of nature that has completely changed how Hollywood does business. So that brings us right back to the big question. How in the world did this even happen? I mean, think about it. This is a company that was totally bankrupt in the 90s. They'd already sold off the movie rights to their A-listers, Spider-Man, the X-Men. So how do you go from rock bottom to the absolute top of the world? Yeah, the answer is definitely not some clean, tidy corporate success story, not at all. It's a story that starts with total failure, a huge, crazy gamble, and believe it or not, a guy who was completely obsessed with toys. All right, so let's get into it. Part one, an empire built on failure. Because you gotta understand, before Marvel was this untouchable empire, it was a total disaster. You have to see the failure to really get the victory. So, the 90s. Man, they were just an absolute train wreck for Marvel. This big comic book speculation bubble burst, and it just wiped out thousands of comic book shops. It got so bad that by 1996, the company had to file for bankruptcy. And that's when a toy company called Toy Biz saw an opportunity. They swooped in, bought the whole thing, and brought in the guy who would change everything. And that guy was Ike Perlmutter. Now, Ike is a character. He's famously reclusive, super, super frugal, and he got his start buying up leftover stuff from other companies and reselling it. His whole business model was basically, our business is built on other people's mistakes. And that's exactly the vibe he brought to a completely broken Marvel. And when I say frugal, I mean, you have no idea. This is where the story gets kind of wild. We're talking about making employees reuse paper clips, literally having someone check the bags of people who got fired to make sure they weren't stealing comics. The conference room chairs were all mismatched, and sometimes they'd just break when people sat on them. And my personal favorite, you couldn't order new pens for the office until every last purple pen from the variety packs was used up. Seriously, that was the culture. So you're probably asking, how do you escape that kind of penny-pinching hell? Well, in a move that was just completely bonkers for them, they took every dime they had and they bet it all. They self-financed one massive movie starring a B-list hero that, let's be honest, almost nobody outside of a comic shop had ever heard of. And that movie was Iron Man. The production was, to put it mildly, absolute chaos. Okay, step one, they cast Robert Downey Jr. An incredible actor, sure, but at the time, he was seen as a massive insurance risk, a huge gamble. Step two, the script. Or, well, the lack of one. They started shooting without a finished screenplay, literally making up lines on the set every single day. And step three, that secret ending, they just kind of tossed in that post-credit scene with Nick Fury as an experiment, having no idea that they had just lit the fuse for an entire cinematic universe. And if you want to know just how crazy it was on set, listen to this. Jeff Bridges, who played the villain Obadiah Stane, he said it felt like they were in a $200 million student film. Think about that. Every single choice they made should have led to a massive failure, but it didn't. Against all odds, Iron Man was a monster hit. So Iron Man works. It's a huge hit. But now Marvel has a whole new problem. How in the world do you do that again? Was it just a fluke? The answer was to create a whole new way of making movies, what we now know as the Marvel method. And right at the center of that whole method, you have one guy, Kevin Feige. And he wasn't your typical slick Hollywood suit. He was a legit movie nerd from New Jersey, the kind of kid who wallpapered his bedroom with movie posters. He was the architect of everything that came next. And Feige's own story is really all about persistence. I mean, he got rejected from his dream film school, USC, 5 times before they finally let him in. He clawed his way up from being a producer's assistant, and he learned this one really crucial lesson from Richard Donner, the director of Superman. Donner had a single word hanging up in his office: verisimilitude. It's a fancy word, but it just means making things feel true or real. And that was Feige's whole philosophy. Even if you have gods and super soldiers, the story, the characters, they have to feel real. So with that in mind, Feige basically took the old Hollywood playbook and just threw it out the window. Instead of a studio just buying a character and telling some director, go make a movie, Marvel did it all in-house. They developed the story first, their own visual artists would actually design the big action scenes before a director was even on board, and they had this group of producers, they called them the Parliament, whose whole job was to make sure every single movie fit together. See, the goal wasn't just to make one good movie, it was to build one giant connected universe. Okay, so here's the crucial turning point. This brand new way of making movies, it did not go over well with the old guard back in New York. And what happened next was basically a brutal, internal civil war for the soul of Marvel. You had two totally different philosophies clashing. On one side, you've got Kevin Feige saying, story comes first, let's trust our directors, let's build something that will last. But on the other side, you had Ike Perlmutter and his creative committee back in New York. And for them, it was always about one question: what's going to sell more toys? This wasn't a small disagreement. It was a constant battle over everything. And this wasn't just some abstract debate. It had real consequences for the movies. For Thor: The Dark World, the director Patty Jenkins, who, went on to make Wonder Woman, she quit because the committee rejected her story and forced her to use a villain that they thought would make a better toy. Ike Perlmutter himself argued against female-led superhero movies, saying they were bad investments. And he tried to cut Black Widow's role in the Avengers. And probably the most infamous example, for Age of Ultron, you know that awesome scene where Black Widow escapes on a motorcycle? Well, they made a toy of it, but they put Captain America and Iron Man on the bike instead of her. It was that bad. So by 2015, Feige was at his breaking point. He was basically ready to walk away from it all. As a last resort, he went over Ike Perlmutter's head and went straight to the big boss at Disney, Bob Iger. He made his case, and amazingly, Iger sided with him. In a huge corporate shakeup, Marvel Studios was pulled out from under Perlmutter and his committee. And that was the moment that finally opened the door for movies like Black Panther and Captain Marvel to even get made. And winning that war, it just unleashed this incredible, unprecedented run of hit after hit, all leading up to the world-changing phenomenon that was Avengers Endgame. But that created a brand new, terrifying question. What in the world do you do after that? You have to understand the pressure of keeping this machine running is just immense. Joss Whedon, the guy who directed the first two Avengers movies, he talked about making Age of Ultron and just said it was horrible, that he felt like a failure every day. The Marvel method is amazing at producing hits, but man, it can really burn out the people making them. So you go from the Avengers in 2012, which proved this whole shared universe idea could actually work, all the way to Endgame in 2019, which was just, the perfect finale to a 22-film story. They reached a peak that no one thought was possible. But now, the Infinity Saga is done. Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, the very foundation of this universe, they're gone. And that leaves all of us with the big, multi-billion-dollar question for the future. Was the success of the MCU really a replicable formula? A method that you can just plug new characters into and it'll work forever? Or was it a perfect storm? A once-in-a-lifetime combination of casting, timing, and pure luck? A lightning strike that you can never, ever capture in a bottle again? That, right there, is the challenge Marvel is facing right now.